Hey everybody, it's Pastor Dylan and welcome to the Dayspring Wesleyan Church podcast. At the end of this episode, please take the time to download our church app. It's the best way to stay connected to the life of the church. All you have to do is go to the App Store, search for Church Center, download and enter the information for our church. You will then be connected to our church community. I hope the following presentation inspires you to move closer to God in this journey we call faith. Enjoy.
Good morning, church. I have to apologize. I didn't know they were going to show my workout video, and I usually don't take off my shirt in front of people like that, so I apologize this time. We're starting a new series called Buff Christianity, and you may wonder what that's about. And it all stemmed from a conversation that we had in one of our men's Bible studies, and it was about this idea of going out and watching people work out. And you see all these, really buff guys and doing all this stuff, and how intimidating it can be. And it reminded me when I was in high school. I used to love lifting weights. It was part of my routine. And at that time, I only weighed 120 pounds. And I remember when I was a senior in high school, my football coach said to me, I think you need to go do a weightlifting competition. And I thought, well, that's cool. And I didn't understand at the time because I thought all my friends were big. They lifted a lot. So I just figured we were all sort of in this together. I didn't realize the weight comparison. So I went to my first weightlifting competition, and my cousin Keith went with me. And I remember when I got there, though, one of the things that was nervous for me was I went to saw different people in my weight class, and there was a bunch of girls there, and I thought, oh man, if they outlift me, this is going to be bad, And so we went to lift, and when I did the bench press was the first thing we did, and when I went and did my bench press, right after I did my first, what I consider my warm-up, a guy came up to me, he's like, you just broke the state record. And I was like, are you kidding me? And then there was this part of me that was like, yeah, well, that's no big deal, man. You should see what I really do, and I really want to try, And so we went through the rest of the weightlifting competition. I ended up finding out, by the way, because I didn't do any of the lifts after that, because I'm like, if I broke the record, there's no reason to do anything else, But I got first place on the bench press, and then the guy came back up later. He's like, I have to apologize. You did not break the record. And I was like, are you kidding me? Because I could have went a little bit higher, but that was no big deal. But then we went to squats. And squats, man, what I realized, the way we were doing squats in high school was way different than what they wanted you to do in a competition. So when I would do squats, I would go down about this far, And what I found out is they wanted you to go parallel. I would show you that, but I'll probably rip my pants. And I would rather not do that at this point, okay? But they wanted you to go down parallel. I went down parallel with what I thought was my warm-up weight. And, man, I pulled something and then got 0 points like the rest of the competition, So anyway, I tell you that because when it was years later, and when I became a youth pastor, a group of the guys that were lifting for football, they had heard me tell some of these stories. And they're like, hey, Pastor Chuck, you should come lift with us. And I was like, sure. I haven't done it in 10 years. Why not? And so I went in there, and listen, I'm not I know you think I'm a dummy, but sometimes I can think things through. And I thought to myself, dude, when you get in there, go light, okay? Because you don't want to hurt yourself. So anyways, I went in there, and those guys started lifting what I considered some heavy weight. I'm like, man, there's no way I can go light. I got to prove to these guys who the man is in this situation, So I decided to go more weight, and I lifted it. I was pretty proud of myself. And then I woke up the next morning and thought I was going to die. My neck was like this for a week, and I would just walk around because I was so sore from this experience. But what it got me thinking about is there is this need to be in shape. And I think every January, when we go through our New Year's resolutions, one of the things we say we want to get back into the gym, we want to get healthy and stuff. But one of the intimidating things is when you go into these gyms and you see these huge guys and they have muscles on top of muscles. You know what I mean? They're just big and buff. And I sit there and I look at them and I'm like, man, I'm intimidated. Because even though, when I was stronger, I never had, muscles like that, I was just a scrawny guy. And they had, muscles. And so you go in there, you get very intimidated. But then it started, by the way, when you go in there and watch them, too, it's kind of funny, right? Because, their jug of water is bigger than probably what I lift now. You know what I mean? They have these big jug of water. I got, this little bottle. I'm like, oh, man, I can't even carry as much water as they can, So anyways, you watch them, and they lift, and they do all that stuff, and they're looking at themselves in the mirror, and I'm like, oh, man, I'd love to be able to do that too, but that ain't happening. So you watch them, but it's just this very intimidating thing. And so a lot of us walk out thinking, I could never get to that place, so, why keep doing this? But I can tell you, I started thinking about these guys. I'm like, man, these guys are big and stuff, but like, what do they do with those muscles? So I started asking some of the guys, and one of the guys was like, yeah, I work at an office, I'm an accountant, and I'm like, dude, is your pen that heavy that you need that many muscles? You know what I mean? Like, oh, I can write now, And so you started asking that. What you realize, most of them actually don't need the amount of muscles that they have. So I'm like, well, what do they need them for? And in my eyes, it was just so that they could look good and show off, And what I began to picture is this, is that most of them really don't do anything with those muscles. And I started thinking about, when we were in this Bible study, I started thinking about it as far as the church as well. I think we have a lot of people that come into here. And I think it can be very intimidating for people. Because you have some people that really dress like, man, they are super holy. There are people that you can just tell, like, they're reading their Bible, like they have the scripture memorized. And again, they're super holy. You hear some guys get up and pray. We were talking, Pastor Bo gave a prayer after church, and somebody came up to me afterwards, and they're like, man, I cannot pray like that. That can be intimidating, right? Because we compare ourselves to what we consider are these spiritual giants. But I have to tell you, I grew up in a church of spiritual giants, where they really looked like they were buff as far as Christianity. But when you really got down to it, what were they doing with their lives? When I talk about people being like huge and strong, are they using their strength to really help people? And Christian-wise, when people are really holy, when they've really committed themselves to prayer and the study of the scriptures, like, what do they do with that? Are they bring people closer to God? Are they making a difference in the world? Are they loving the unlovable? Because if they're not, then that holiness that they have about them really means nothing. And so we can get very intimidated by people not understanding that at the end of the day, maybe they're distracting people away from the gospel. And I have to tell you, in some of the situations I grew up in, we had some what I would consider the most spiritual giants out there. But they were turning people away from the gospel because of the things that they were requiring of them. They weren't allowing the Holy Spirit to do the work. And I hope you understand, I know it sounds like sometimes I'm knocking some of my church experiences, but listen, I'm very thankful for my church experiences. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for watching my parents and see how their faith worked out as well. But I wanted us to look at this over the next several weeks. I want us to look at ourselves through some biblical characters and some biblical situations. And I want us to see, how do we measure up? Like, what are some of the things that they went through? What are some of the things they succumbed to? I want to make sure that we don't fall into the same trap. So I want to start out with pretty much the buffest guy in the scriptures, and that's the man Samson, who was considered a judge. And probably have heard some of the story of Samson, so we'll go over to that today. And I have to challenge you to do this. I'm not going to share everything. There's 3 chapters worth of stuff here. So some of it, I'm just going to give you a synopsis of what's going on. I would really encourage you to dig in there and find out. And I might even say some things out of order. Forgive me, because we're just trying to fly through things a little bit today, because we have a lot of notes to go through. So let's start out here with Judges chapter 16, verses 23 through 31. And this is basically at the end of Samson's life. Verse 23 says, "Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, to celebrate, saying, 'Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands.' When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, 'Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste our land and multiplied our slain.' While they were in the high spirits, they shouted, 'Bring out Samson to entertain us.' So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. When they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, 'Put me where I can feel the pillars, so that the support of the temple, so that I may lean against them.' Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers and the Philistines were there, and on the roof there were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, 'Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just one more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes.' Then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. Samson said, 'Let me die with the Philistines.' Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than when he lived." Then his brothers and his father's whole family went down to get him. They brought him back and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah, his father. He had led Israel for 20 years. Let's pray together. Father, this is an interesting biblical account that we have. And in that we see you calling Samson. And as we go through it today, we're going to wonder, why did you call a person like Samson who had so many flaws along the way? Father, I pray that we too would be able to examine our own lives and say, okay, where are our flaws, where are our misgivings, and where are the things that we need to worry about and take care of so we don't fall into the same traps. And I pray, Lord, that we would leave today being changed. I pray that the only voice that would speak today would be yours and not mine. And Father, anything that I would mess up, may you clean it up so that your people would only hear you. In your name we pray. Amen. So I want to give you a quick sort of understanding of what Judges is. The book of Judges is all about a cycle of sin that the people kept falling into. And so in verse 13:1, you're going to read this. It says, again, which if you read the word again, it means that this has already happened before. And so the writer's letting us know, again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Israelites are repeating the same sort of cycle that they're doing evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. So we have this cycle of sin that we read in Judges 13, which permeates itself all through Judges. First of all, it says, the cycle of sin starts out, the people sin. They do evil in the eyes of the Lord. They're not following the Lord's command. And as a result, they're beginning to follow different idols. They're beginning to get rid of the true God and to follow other things out there. And as a result, God always brings judgment through like a foreign oppression. So there is another nation that will take them over, and they'll sort of be delivered. They'll be either slaves or have things demanded of them. And it's just a tumultuous time for the people of Israel. And then we have God raising up a deliverer, or in this case, a judge. And so there's different judges that we'll read in the book of Judges. And then as a result, the people repent and turn back to God. Now, I say all that to say this, that I believe that nations go through these different cycles as well. And I believe that America has gone through this cycle over and over again. We just don't always realize it. But I recognize that the more and more we get into sin, it feels like some foreign oppression happens to us, whether we're attacked, whether we go into war, something comes about as a result of our sin. And then what you'll see always, as we're given into some of this foreign oppression, you'll see that the churches begin to find more and more people coming. Why? Because there's a sense of we need to repent. A sense of we need to get closer to God because this could be the end. And so then we're delivered at some point. We stick in our repentance for a while, but then we slowly fade back into the sin again. And I really believe, if you watch the way that things are going in America right now, I really, really believe that we're heading back into a time of getting away from God. And the church is just as guilty as anyone else out there. Because we're not following the Word of God. We're not holding true to it. So Samson is one of the deliverers at the time. Samson was a judge. And I want us to notice some things right away about Samson, and I want to look at the strengths of Samson. And so let's look at Judges 13, 2 through 5. It says this, a certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of Danites had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, you are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines. So right away, God says, look, I'm speaking to you here, Manoah and his wife, and you are going to have a child. And here's some things that I want you to do with this child. What you need to understand, that one of the strengths for Samson was his parents. God doesn't just come to anybody. He just doesn't send an angel Lord to anybody. But he's choosing people who will follow his ways, who have a heart that's bent towards the thing of the Lord. And what he was asking Manoah's wife to do, he says, listen, even as the child is in you, I don't want you to have any grapes. I don't want you to have anything that is unclean. I don't want you to have any wine. And he knew that in speaking into Manoah's wife, that she would in fact follow those principles. She also knew through some of their, or God also knew through some of their conversations, that these people would have a bent towards God, and they wouldn't want to displease God. So there was this idea that they would bring this child up in the ways of the Lord. And man, one of the things that most of us have when we have Christian parents is that's a strength for us. And the strength should be that our parents should be teaching us the Word of God. They should be doing devotions with us. They should be bringing us to church. They should be loving us differently than the world does. And they should be making sure that we're accepting Christ at an early age so that when we grow old, we will not depart from it. So parents can always be a strength. Now, not everyone obviously comes from the most perfect situation. But in this case, Samson had parents who were devoted to God. And the angel of the Lord said, look, I want you to take these vows, and these are what we call the Nazirite vows, and they're going to have to do with no wine, and don't cut your hair, and don't touch the dead. And these vows are important, but I want you to know this. When people took on Nazirite vows, generally they were for a period of time. So you might do it for either 30 days, 60 days, 90 to 100 days is what you would generally commit to. And you would say, for that period, I won't have any wine, won't have any grapes, any raisins. I mean, it was that big a deal. You would say, I'm not going to cut my hair for that period of time, or I'm not going to touch anything that's dead. Like, that would be the commitment you would make. But they were asking Samson to make that commitment for life. And there's 3 individuals in the Bible that we have making those same kind of commitments. One was Samuel, the second was Samson, and then the last was John the Baptist in the New Testament. They would have completed out those Nazirite vows. And you might wonder what's the importance of the vows. And when he says no wine, what you need to understand is that wine was associated with the word joy. And so sometimes you read about these joyous feasts, which were basically wine feast. Like, it was a sign of happiness in that time. It was the bubbling up just of wine. It was the bubbling up of happiness in one's life. But the importance of no wine is this. It's said that joy comes from the supernatural and not the natural. So who should our joy come from? God. It doesn't need to come from the things of this world. It should come from God. And so that was one of the first Nazirite vows that they took. The second was, don't cut your hair. Now, this is interesting to me because, well, for one thing, I can't grow long hair, so I'm already in trouble. I can't keep that Nazirite vow. Well, I can, but you're just not going to see anything, you know. So the long hair showed that you were set apart and that there was accountability into it. So you would grow this long hair and you would have this long beard, especially if it's for life. Like, you would look at somebody who has that demeanor about them right now, and that's what they're wearing, and you would say to yourself, they are a Nazirite. They are keeping a Nazirite vow right now. They're setting them apart for God. And you could tell that by their hair. And so in doing that, there was some accountability, which again goes against the way it's brought up in church. Because in church, if you had long hair when I was growing up, they were like, man, that's a sinner. You know, and I'm like, no, they were just a Nazirite. You know, they're just keeping the Nazirite vows. Okay, we need to give them some slack, you know. But that was one of those vows that they kept. And here's the thing is, I think that what all of us need to recognize is this. There's a certain vow that we take in becoming a Christian, and that we say we're a Christ follower. And in being a Christ follower, when I tell people there are certain expectations of how I live my life. Now, I would love to tell you that I get it right 100% of the time, but I don't. But as a Christian, there needs to be this need to say, you know what, I got to confess, I messed up there. And by the grace of God, I'll do better. And I'm glad that the cross was enough to forgive me. Third vow was this, that don't touch anything dead. That non-action meant that you were clean. Because if you touched something that was dead, there was diseases you could get at the time. The crazy thing about the Nazirite vow, if you were on a Nazirite vow and your parents died during that time, you were not allowed to bury them. I mean, that's how intent they were in these vows, that they wanted God to know, like, above anything else, we love you. And I have to tell you, church, when you and I become believers, there's a certain amount of holiness or a certain amount of clean living that we need to live so that the world will know that we're clean. The world will know that we're different. And that in our differentness, we can still make it in this world. And they need to see that. And so there were the 3 vows that they took. And then the last strength was not just the vows, but I want you to know this. The strength was really in God himself. And I think we miss out on that because we look at these vows and we say, look how holy they were. But by the end of the day, as we go through these vows that he began to break, what you'll notice is he breaks the vow of being around grapes. He breaks the vow of touching dead things. And then he breaks the vow of getting his hair cut. Now listen, did he lose his strength when he was around the grapes? No. Did he lose his strength when he was around the dead stuff? No. We tend to think that he lost his strength when he got his haircut. Had nothing to do with getting his haircut. His real strength came from who? God. And where does our strength come from? God. It's amazing to me that God would take somebody like me who is probably not the most eloquent speaker, and yet God uses a message like today or in the past, and he speaks to you. That's nothing to do with me. I don't have that skill to do that. There's nothing in me that can save your life. The only person that can save your life is Jesus Christ. And it's by his power that we're able to do things. It's by his power that this church grows. It's by his power that we have the buildings that we have. It's by his power that we're making a difference in our community. It's by his power that we make a difference in the world. If at any point we think it's in our power, we'll lose it. Because it's not in our power, it's in the power of God. And Samson had the power of God, and it was a strength. So as we read on and continue on the story, I want us to notice that there were some weaknesses that began to show up in Samson's life. So chapter 14, verses 1 through 4. And if we go on here for just a moment, man, his parents were so devoted that, Manoah's wife got the call from the Lord. And then Manoah's like, oh, I wish I would have been there. I'm going to pray that I sense it as well. And then it says the angel of the Lord shows up again to Manoah's wife. And then all of a sudden she comes out to get Manoah. Manoah comes and he's like, oh, this is the angel of the Lord. And they begin to talk to him. And we're going to do the things that you've commanded. And they said, would you stay and eat with us? We want to kill something for you and cut it up and you can eat it. And he says, no, just offer it as a sacrifice. And as they're offering the sacrifice, something happens in that moment where the Spirit of the Lord and the sacrifice come together in such a unique way that they realize at the end of all that, Manoah says, this is God. And then he gets scared. And I love this because there's not only this love and devotion for God, but there's also this holy, fearful reverence of God as well. He thought to himself, we've been in the presence of God, we're going to die. And then it takes his wife and says, hey, dummy. If God wanted to kill us, we'd already be dead. He says we're going to have a son, let's just go with that. All right, let's take him at his word. And so they begin to follow those things. And so they begin to bring Samson up in the ways of the Lord. And so we get into weaknesses that begin to show up in Samson. And the first I would suggest to you is the attitude of pride. So Judges 14, 1 through 4 says this: Samson went down to Timnah and saw there was a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. Her father and mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives, among our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? But Samson said to his father, get her for me. She's the right one for me. And then verse 4 goes on to say, his parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at the same time they were ruling over Israel. Now, this one just drives me crazy at first. Because I'm telling you, if I spoke that way to my parents, was I going to be in some trouble? You know, and in his pride, Samson's like, I'm Samson. I'm strong. What woman would not want me? If I want that woman, I'll get that woman. And he says, listen, parent, go get me that woman. And they try to plead their case because, again, a strength for him is his parents. And they're like, hey, son, listen. You know, they tell us not to intermarry with other, sort of with other people and faiths and stuff. And the reason why is because they have other gods that they serve. And we got to follow the true God. And so how can we mix ourselves with them? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, this would be the better way to go. And they pleaded with him. And Samson, at the end of the day, still says, no, this is what I want. And I have to tell you, how many times has pride gotten in our way as well? I've been around couples that have been married. And one, we try to tell our kids, let's try to choose people with the same belief. Not the same church, it's the same belief. Like, you have the same standards. Like, that seems a better way to go. And some people in their pride will say, well, it doesn't matter. I'll get them saved. Or they'll come to church with me. And what they find out, they never do. And it's not that their marriages aren't still healthy, but, man, it's a little bit of a predicament for them. But in our pride, sometimes we say, well, I know best. And in our pride, we tend to do things that glorify us. We give over to our own desires in my pride. Well, I think I can handle this situation. I don't need to tell anybody about that. I'm bigger than this. My kids will challenge me on something. Do you know who I am? I'm the pastor of this church. And pride can get the best of us. We can do that at work and think, well, those guys don't know anything. They're new. What would they ever know? And our pride gets us in our way. And what do they say? Pride sets us up for a fall. And it's true. And what happens, and even in our pride, and even in the story of Samson as we move on, like what we find that we are more afraid than we let on. That we're more afraid of somebody coming in and taking our place, or coming in and taking our job, or them being right. And we're afraid to take the steps that we really need to. And in our pride, it drives us to the second weakness of Samson, which is he began to keep secrets. And Samson begins to keep these secrets about his life. Because Samson starts breaking the vows. These are vows that would set him apart. Like, this is why I'm holy, because I'm following these Nazirite vows. And he begins to start breaking them. And look at this. In Judges 14, 5 through 6, after his parents had pleaded with him, it says Samson went down to Timnah together with his family, with his father and mother. As they approached, listen to this, the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring toward him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so they tore the lion apart with his bare hands, and in his might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father nor mother what he had done. Now listen, the fact that he was amongst the vineyards is already a big deal, because he wasn't allowed to be around. You weren't allowed to be around grapes, raisins. It wasn't just about drinking. You just weren't allowed to be around it because you'd be associated with it, and you got to be set apart. And so they went ahead and walked around the vineyards, which was a no-no for them. But in the process of being in their vineyard, it says that a young lion comes up to attack him. And by the way, I don't mean to be graphic. I just want you to know what was taking place. And by the way, I love to eat meat, but I'm not the guy that's going to kill or do anything with it, because I just can't stand that side of the blood or anything, okay? But it says, like in the Old Testament, when they took a goat, they would rip the legs apart, and that's how they would kill something. And it says that Samson had a lion coming to him, and guess what he did? He just ripped the legs apart with all that strength and might. And then after doing this mighty feat, what does he do? He doesn't do what I would have done. I'd have been like, hey, you missed it. A lion just tried to attack me. I ripped it apart. You want to see these guns? You know, that's how I'd want to. And Samson doesn't brag about it at all, but he keeps quiet to himself. One is he doesn't want people to know where he was. But two, it leads up to his second secret. Because the second secret is about the honey. Because in Judges 14, 8 through 9, it says this: sometime later, he went back to marry her. He turned aside to look at the lion's carcass, and in it, he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. He scooped out of the honey with his hands and ate as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they too ate it. But he did not tell them he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. Did you get that? He had to get another secret. The secret was what? There's a dead lion laying there. Now, I can't believe this, but he sees a swarm of bees, and he decides, I'm going in after the honey. Again, that shows how much pride he has in his own strength. But he takes that honey, eats it. Now listen, he has now touched what? A dead carcass, breaking another one of the vows. And it says he keeps it a secret, because if people find out, maybe they won't follow him like they once did. And then we read later that he uses his secret when he's trying to marry. He's trying to marry this Philistine woman. It says that he threw out sort of a test or a riddle to the guys, and he said this. He said, out of the eater something to eat, out of the strong something sweet. And he said, look, if you guys don't get this right within a period of time, then I am going to, then you owe me 30 garments. But if you get it right, I owe you 30 garments. Well, the men couldn't get it right. So they went up to who's going to be Samson's wife, and they said to her, look, man, if you don't tell us the answer to this riddle, we're going to kill you. Well, she does a smart thing. She's like, well, I got to find out the answer. So she tells Samson, you got to tell me this answer. He doesn't tell her, but after enough nagging, he says, okay, here's the answer. And so these Philistines come back, and again, he poses, what they say to him is this: what is sweeter than honey, what is stronger than a lion? Because they've been given the answer. And this was a secret he tried to keep. But now they know. And Samson's reply, by the way, I would never suggest this. He said, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. So going into marriage is probably a good thing not to call your wife a heifer. Okay, I just want to throw that out there right now. But that's what he says, because he's so upset in this moment. And so as in being upset, man, he goes away and he says, I don't want to pay for these things myself. And so he goes up to this place in Ashkelon, which we're going to read. It says that 30 men he struck down. So in Judges 4:19, then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, ripped them of everything, and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. Burning with anger, he returned to his father's house. So if you would know in relation to where he was, he went a long ways away. Why? Because he wanted to keep secret what he was doing. He killed 30 men, brought back the garments, and gave it to these men. Now, Samson left for some time, and because of weird customs of that day, he decided to come back and take his wife, but his wife had been handed over to some of his best men. And by the way, the best men weren't from his tribe. They were from the other tribe, which is a whole other weird thing as well. And so his wife was handed over. Man, he again burned with anger against his father-in-law and, who was going to be his wife. And it says that he tied these foxes or these jackals in that time. He tied some like fire around their tails, and he had them go through the fields. And they burnt all the Philistine fields down. Well, the Philistines got up mad. And so then as a result, the lady who told the secret, her family ended up getting burned anyways. And they were put to death. So Samson went after them as well and burned all their fields because of the same thing. As Samson was hiding out for some time, the Philistine men were upset. The Philistines began to come closer to Judah. The people of Judah got really nervous because they had put their support and strength in Samson, but Samson wasn't around. And these Philistines said, look, we're going to kill you guys if you don't get Samson under control. And so it says 3,000 men of Judah went to Samson. I said, Samson, look, man, you've put us in a rough place. We need to tie you up and take you to the Philistines. He says, okay, you can tie me up as long as you promise not to kill me. They said, no big deal. We're giving you over to them anyways. So he went over there, and it says he broke his restraints. And then he took the jawbone of a donkey, again, grabbing something that was dead, which was unclean, and he struck down 1,000 of the Philistine men with that one donkey's jawbone. And when he got done, he literally said, look at what I've done. You see, he took credit for his strength in that moment. And then what's weird, in the next moment, he cries out to God. And he says, I need some water. I'm thirsty because look at what I've done. I now need some strength. And it says the Lord opens up the rock for him and he gets something to drink. And then we have this next sort of story and phase happen. And I'm going to rush through this pretty quickly, but again, I would ask you to read this on your own, so just bear with me because I'm trying to get to the notes. But I want you to understand what happens next. Samson, it says, goes and sleeps with a prostitute. Again, big sin. And as he's sleeping with the prostitute, it says that the Philistine men lay in wait and they want to attack him, but they fall asleep. When Samson wakes up, he leaves the place, and the gates have been closed because they want to trap him. And these are big gate doors. It says that Samson rips them off and carries them with him. I mean, that's the strength that he has. And then sometime later, we read again that he falls for another Philistine woman, Delilah. And Delilah, it said that the Philistine men came to him and said, you got to find out what Samson's strength is. And when you find out, tell us so that we can kill him. And so time after time, she comes to him, and he makes up these things. It's sort of a cat and mouse game. And I think this whole thing is weird, by the way, too, because she keeps restraining him, and then he keeps telling her another secret. At some point, I was like, this is probably not a good relationship to be in. But again, his pride is in the way. So anyways, he tells her 3 different things. All of them are false. Every time they come in, it seems like they can't take him because he breaks through anything that they've done. Until the last time, when what happens? Samson's hair is cut off. And again, we think in that moment that's why he lost his strength, because of his hair. But it's not because of his hair was cut. It was because the Spirit of the Lord left him. Once he told Delilah, and he said, look, this God said as long as my hair is okay. But he also said if you don't drink wine, he also said don't touch anything, and all those things that happened, and he still had strength. So it wasn't about the vows, it was about the Spirit of God leaving him. And when the Spirit of God left him, he became weak. So in Judges 16:20 through 21, here's what I want you to understand. His choices were his weakness. Samson chose his desire over God's desire, and the Spirit of God left. So Judges 16, 20 through 21 says this. Then she called, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, took him down to Gaza, binding him with bronze shackles. They set him to grinding grain in the prison. The Spirit of God left him. And this was a moment of sin. And here's what I want you to know as this story points out. His eyes were gouged out. He was bound. And he had to grind. And here's what you need to know about sin. Sin blinds us. We get so accustomed to the darkness and the things of this world that we don't even know that sin is existing in our time. Man, there is more darkness coming in our time than ever before, to such the point that I've never been a big prayer about that, but I've been praying, Lord, come quickly, because I don't want to see what my kids go through. Now, maybe the prayer should be more on repentance, I don't know. But either way, things have got to change, because the church is becoming used to the darkness, and we're allowing sin to be more about us, because sin always blinds us. Secondly, sin binds us. Because sin takes a hold of your life, and it's like something you can't get out of. You know that if you've kept something in secret, there are many times that you're afraid to say anything, because what will people think of me if they know this about my life? Like, they won't listen to me anymore. They'll reject me. They'll put me aside. And so we're afraid to confess our sins. We know that if we tell one lie, that it takes another lie and another lie and another lie to support those lies, because sin binds us. And it's through the work and the power of Jesus Christ that the cross allowed us to see, that it became the light for us. It's the part of the cross that broke us from those shackles and allows us to be set free. But also sin grinds on us. It wears us down. Like, there's things that we do differently. And we see the results of sin. We see our families messed up. We see our churches messed up. We see our society messed up. And it weighs on us. It grinds us. And sin always grinds us, but God has made a way for that to all be made new and different. See, what Samson's biggest problem was is like he had a desire and a lust for the things of this world, a lust for women, a lust for power, a lust for prestige. And what he didn't do is he never closed the door on sin. You and I have to choose to close the door on sin. You know, when he could have brought some of his family members with him to his first wedding, he didn't have anybody with him. Instead, he had the Philistines who had to stand up beside him. He could have closed the door right there. When his parents first said to him, look, you don't want to marry anybody from that group because their beliefs are different, he could have closed the door right then. When he was beginning to get angry and beginning to get upset, he could have chose to do things differently, but he chose not to. And when he could have closed the door on sin, he kept walking right through it. In church, you and I have to close the door on sin. We have to recognize what temptations are binding us, what temptations are pulling us out of God's presence, and we have to say, not today, boom, and shut that door. But that's a choice that you and I have to make with the help of God. And then what's crazy to me about this whole story is this. I don't understand. And when I was reading, I was like, this is just ridiculous. Why would God choose a man like Samson? A man that continued to break his vows. A man that was raised right but chose to go a different path. A man that was, he fell for his own desires. Why would God ever choose someone as sinful as that to do a work? And I was reading, it was like one person said, when you think about it, all God has to work with is sinners. And that includes me. Paul says, man, I was the worst of them. And what I found is that man, God's power is so unbelievable that even when we don't follow our ways, he'll still make a way. Even when we choose to walk out of it, he'll choose something else. And he'll still get his will done. God worked in spite of our sin. And so what happens is this. We begin to see then at the end of the story, and what we read at the beginning here, is we begin to see the repentance of Samson. And Samson was totally humiliated at this point. He had his eyes taken from him, which was a big thing in the Jewish culture. You need to be able to see. He was stripped of everything, had his hair cut off. That was the source of his power. That's what made him set apart. And he was now stripped away of that. And then he had to grind. And that may not make any difference to us, but in that culture, that was a woman's work. And that was like saying, you're so weak that you're now a woman. And he was completely humiliated in that moment. You know, at the end of a Nazarite vow, you know one of the things that they do? You actually shave your whole head. And because in that moment, you want to show submission or repentance to God. His head shaving was almost forced upon him because that's what he gave up. And in that moment of humiliation, he begins to repent to God. And 28 says this, of chapter 16, that Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me, please God, strengthen me just one more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." I want you to notice something in the way that Samson uses the word God. When Samson is telling Delilah about God saying that this was the strength, his hair, he uses a term for God that is Elohim, which is the generic form of God, which means he doesn't even recognize in that moment that my power comes from the true God. He says, well, this God supposedly came to my parents and said, here's the things. Well, Samson had already known that he hadn't lost his power with wine. He hadn't lost his power with touching dead things. So certainly he wasn't going to lose his power in the hair thing because this is all made up at this point. And he uses a generic word for God. But I want you to notice what happens in repentance. Because in his repentant spirit in verse 28, the term for God that he uses is Yahweh, Jehovah, which is the true God. And in that moment, what Samson realizes, that my strength never came from my vows. My strength came from God. And without the Lord's help, there is nothing I can do. You see, there's a difference between knowing about God and knowing God. Samson submitted to God's will, and as a result, and this may be hard for some to understand, but he destroyed more men, he destroyed more Philistines in that one moment than he had ever done in his own power, because God came upon him. Church, the question for us is this, is what will it take for you and me to submit to God and say, God, everything I have is yours. My strength comes from you. Help me to deal with my pride. Help me to deal with my secrets. Help me to deal with anything that would turn me away from you. What would that mean? Would you stand with me this morning? Let's pray together. Father, in these moments and when we read your word and we recognize the leadership responsibility that you had for Samson, and man, his own pride and his own lust and his own desires got in the way. But at the end, when he repented and he knew your strength, he did an amazing thing. And for some of us, man, this is just sort of a harsh thing. But I hope that none of us will leave just dwelling on that one thing. But the thing that we dwell on today is knowing this, that when we follow God and when we allow God to be the source of our power and our strength, we can accomplish some huge things. So I pray, Father, that many of us who are in the Word or in the faith and call ourselves Christians, that we would do something with this holy muscle that we have, and that we would bring people into the kingdom, that we would make a difference in our world, we would make a difference in our schools, in our workplaces, in society, in our country, and that we would show what it's like to be a follower of God and put our strength, hope, and trust in you. So we leave today hopefully changed. In your name we pray. Amen.
Once again, thanks for listening. If you are in the Marion area, we would love to engage with you at one of our Sunday morning gatherings. For directions, service times, and information about our fantastic children and student ministries, visit us at dayspringwesleyan.org. That's dayspringwesleyan.org.